It's probably, yeah, we're going to talk about, we're going to review ethical conduct. Like I say, probably not the easiest of the 10 parameters to discuss, but no one's being judged here, you know. And then we'll move it on to the next parami, which is renunciation. If you have something to say and you don't want your face on the recording, then you can just turn your video off. Other than that, very interesting what kinds of experiences you had in trying to maintain your ethical conduct, what kinds of insights you might have had along the way. If anyone has anything interesting they'd like to discuss, you're very welcome. If you put your hand up, the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and then if I could ask you to unmute when I call your name out. So, Peter, if you could unmute.
Hi, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was challenging. Well, only one particular part of one of the particular precepts was more challenging than others. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't seem to have any problem with not killing or harming anything, or taking or stealing, or wrongful sexual behavior, or drink or drugs, but um, speech was really difficult. Um, it just, I became aware of how much I can be very subtly economical with the truth. Um, I suppose, a lie is a lie. It's black or white, but sometimes I couldn't always be bothered to completely tell the absolute truth to people because it would need a lengthy explanation. So I'd slightly exaggerate what might have happened or something, because I didn't really want to go into the whole thing of what actually happened in various things. I was really trying hard to be as mindful as I could to tell the absolute truth to people all the time.
Hmm.
And it was just difficult. And also it was difficult if I'd had some sort of interaction with somebody that wasn't particularly harmonious, and then I'd walk away and I'd be muttering under my breath about what I thought about that situation, and that was quite hard to restrain as well. But I was restrained enough that I didn't do it to their face, and so it was a kind of question of restraining my reacting and trying only to respond to a situation. And yeah, I did find it much harder than I thought it would be. But the other like precepts, if you like, weren't as difficult. But right speech, as right as you can endeavor to make it, was challenging. So that was my experience anyway.
Okay, there's a few interesting things in there for me. Firstly, do we ever speak the truth? I mean, it's a more philosophical question, but truth has to be the same for everyone at all times, in all situations. Otherwise, it's not true. It can be many other things, but true is a very special term for me. For something to be true, it means that it's true. It's absolutely true. And then you have a sliding scale of descriptions, and the sliding scale is one of accuracy. So some things are less accurate than others. Some things are completely inaccurate, and we say that's an out and out falsehood. Other things are relatively accurate, but do they fall within the term truth? And this is a very important point, because when we say, like, we might notice something about somebody else, and if we've got this idealized view of precepts, which is I have to be absolutely tell the truth all the time, then we're in a very difficult situation, because there are certain times when speaking whatever it is that you've seen would be highly inappropriate. And so I think we have to recognize that when we say, well, I've noticed something about so and so, and I believe that to be true, what you're saying is you believe that to be fairly accurate. And that's a very important distinction, because if we're only dealing with a description of things and it's only your point of view, it's not the truth, it's your point of view, and you're willing to acknowledge that, that makes these interactions and keeping the precepts that much easier. Because, especially in terms of speech, for instance, that you, okay, all right, so I can gauge what would be the degree of accuracy I have to give this person given the supporting conditions. I don't have to tell them the absolute truth all the time. Because if we're just saying, hello, how are you? Then I'm fine, thank you. Even though you might not be feeling fine, it's still an accurate description in the sense that, that we're just greasing the social wheel, and we don't want to get into any in-depth discussion of how I'm really feeling. Do you see the difference, Peter? So I think it's not going for an absolute perfection in speech. I think it's going for relative accuracy. And we'll come on to this with renunciation. All the precepts are about restraining, aren't they? They're about restraining certain unskillful actions. It's not about being perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And one of the things you might have found in the course of the 2 weeks was there wasn't really much to do in terms of ethics. There really wasn't. It was like sometimes just, I've certainly had occasions where I've gone, okay, I'm not going to say that. This is where I don't say anything. This is where I just sit quietly and nod my head. Yeah. And being non-committal, because to act in this situation probably. So you've got to bear in mind the supporting conditions. Does this make sense, Peter, what I'm saying?
It does make sense. I'm glad you clarified it, because in the back of my mind, I was kind of thinking, well, sometimes it's okay to be a bit economical with a verite in a white lie type of thing, in case someone's feelings might be hurt or something. So it's good to gauge the situation and the context you're in, rather than the perfection.
I think that's very important. It's not that something perhaps does need to be said. Maybe this isn't the time to say it. That's the subtlety, I think.
But generally it was and interesting. I was trying to keep the generosity parami going as well, the previous meeting, and there was lots of happy kind of sort of serendipitous things happening. People were just, just fortunate things were happening. People were being surprisingly kind of generous or surprisingly kind of, generous with their time or with their interaction. Very people responding to me very comfortably. And because I really made a point of being as generous as I can with either my time or my things or whatever, more than I usually do. I've been more conscious of it. So both of the paramis were helping.
That's the key. It's just being more conscious of it. Because we're not trying to max out on the parami. Like, to repeat what I think I said a couple of weeks ago, is that the Buddha's discovery upon his enlightenment, or in his lifetime where he became the Buddha, he realized that when we say perfection, we don't mean maxing out, we mean the middle way. His discovery was the middle way. And so and we'll come on to this with renunciation. But if we become more conscious of the parami as our skillful activities through the day, we find that there are more opportunities to actually act in that way. And as a result, what comes back to us mirrors whatever we give. So if we give generously, we find that more and more we're on the receiving end of life's generosity. And so there's this magical, mysterious sort of two-way thing that goes on. And remember that ultimately what we want is just to be able to sit comfortably in meditation, be relatively happy and free of any guilt or sense in which I'm not fulfilling my duty as a human being, so that we can sit happily and and develop our insight. But yeah, thanks, Peter. Brilliant report.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Annie, would you unmute for me? Thank you.
Hello, Paul. Hello.
Hello, nice to see you.
It occurred to me that self-sabotage presumably does come under that heading of non-ethical conduct. I mean, that would be what I probably am most unskillful, where I'm most unskillful, and that's a very deep-rooted behaviour. But that would be unethical, really, wouldn't it? I suppose, because I was thinking, is that just what you do to other people that you class as that?
Well, no, it's skill both in regard, because we're another person, aren't we?
Well, this is yeah, so it would come under that, yeah. But that is really something that will take. I mean, I think we've had this conversation before about time. I mean, 67 years of doing that, it's very deep rooted indeed, but it's still possible to sort of to change, however gradually, or just keep on noticing it and then saying, oh, that again,
Yes, exactly.
It's
not trying to get rid of it.
Well, it's not within one's power to stop the thoughts. Just absolutely.
Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Wouldn't it be lovely if we could just go
default? Yeah.
Perfectly still mind. Sadly not. So yeah, the spiritually mature approach is to acknowledge these patterns, and to having acknowledged them and not be at war with them, it is then possible to restrain acting upon them further. And that's and one of the things I wanted to talk about this evening was how the parami are an external version of that internal work. So in terms of renunciation, for instance, it's having acknowledged that tendency towards self-sabotage, it's renouncing the seriousness with which that we attach to it. Yeah. So it's
thoughts. Yeah.
So it's not getting rid of the thoughts. It's just going, oh, but those thoughts are not deeply meaningful. They're just, oh, that behavior is just, oh, it's just that behavior again. It's not this really heavy, weighty thing.
That reminds me of the breakout room. The phrase "lighten up" was used, and
sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, lighten up. But in the breakout, lighten up. I'm afraid.
Well, they do call it enlightenment, Annie. They do call it enlightenment.
Very good, very good.
Thank you for that, Annie. Ellen, you have an observation.
Hi, Paul. Yeah. Hello. I have an example of harsh speech. People that know me would likely think of me as pretty calm spoken. And this actually was a bit of an incident prior to this particular challenge or this series. But I am reflecting on where by email, I quickly gave a response to a bully of him bullying me one too many times. It was in red and all caps. It wasn't very long, and it didn't have swear words or anything, but I was basically, I'd had enough of you. And it's like telling someone I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Like I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I blocked him. Like, and in a way it felt very adult that I finally made the decision to do this. But I do know that if I'd sat on it for another 24 hours and then replied, it wouldn't have been in red in all caps, and it would have been, you're always talking about our intention, and are we aware of our intention at the time, like what's in our mental state? And it's so obvious on reflection. My mental state was not calm at all, and I was just full of ill will. And that's what generated that harsh speech. And it could have been different if I'd been more self-composed at the time. But I think that's literally the first time in my life I've ever done anything tearing a strip off anyone. And it comes and goes in my meditation. So it's certainly an issue that I can see comes back. I guess it doesn't disturb me, and I'm not feeling that badly about myself. But it was a very interesting experience to, I don't know, let myself do that or lean into it, or I don't know. But anyhow, good old harsh speech. When is it harsh and when isn't it?
Oh, and when is it justified and when is it not justified? And because I understand that sense of having had enough. I understand it completely, because people do bully, and there comes a point where you do have to stand up, and sometimes it can come out emotionally, and there's been lots of thoughts previously about it. This person is, walks all over boundaries, and then on this occasion they walk all over your boundaries, and it's like boom, something emotional, something direct, and it comes out the way it comes out, right? Now, subsequent to that, you might have to do a bit of work with the painful feelings and the memories of it come arise, because you will experience the results of that. And this is where we have to be intelligent and recognize our humanity, and it's not straight. Sometimes, often, it's not straightforward. And yes, had you left it another 24 hours, perhaps maybe different, but it came out like this. And so it's being willing to recognize subsequently the memories and the painful feelings and the tendency to want to justify or condemn either the other person or yourself, and see that whole process, and let that be brave and courageous to let that process unfold in order to see it. Yeah, because that's condition dependent origination. There's the memory, there's the feeling, there's the, oh, I wish that had been a bit different. There's the arising of feeling of guilt, and then a sense of, I have to justify why I said that in capital red letters, and all this kind of thing. And you just work through it, but you're actually observing the process of condition dependent origination in real time.
Right. And that would apply to any of the ethical conduct, rules of training.
Absolutely. I mean, the intensity of the feeling is going to be dependent on the kind of activity. But if we're consciously, if we're acting more and more consciously with mindfulness and awareness and clear comprehension, then the likelihood of committing a very bad, or doing something extraordinarily unethical is diminishes, doesn't it? It's relative to the amount of mindfulness, and inversely relative to the amount of mindfulness and clear comprehension we have. So yes, so as the path narrows in terms of what we understand to be acceptable and unacceptable, skillful and unskillful based on our own experience, that it narrows the path in terms of what is acceptable to us, but it also narrows the path in terms of what we actually do and what our behaviors actually are. So over time, especially if you go through this reflective process and observe the links of condition-dependent origination, the whole teaching is coming together beautifully. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
I remember upsetting a flatmate who was due to cook, and he cooked the hottest red curry I've ever experienced, and out of a sense of guilt, I ate it all. Oh dear. Right, so what else have we got in terms of ethical behavior? I'm very much hoping, that there isn't, this isn't supposed to be a confessional, but, we can, Rakesh, hello.
Hello, Paul. Yeah, I just wanted to relate a very short episode. It's something that happened about a year ago at work. So I work in this office building, and in the building, there's a little kitchen and there's a fridge, and people just leave their food in there. And I was working late one Friday night, and I knew the fridge had a sign on the outside saying, on Fridays, take away all your food by 6 p.m. because it will get thrown over the weekend. And it was around about 7 p.m. and I was feeling a bit peckish. And I went to the fridge and I spotted a nice sandwich there. And I thought, well, it's not been claimed, it's going to get thrown over the weekend. And I helped myself to it. And I regretted it a lot over the coming days and beyond. and I resolved to never do that again. I just was not comfortable with that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So I mean, that's beautiful illustration of the liminal area between stealing and taking that which has not been given. Because technically, it's been thrown away anyway, because the person hasn't dealt with it. But still, with all these things, they leave a stain in the mind.
yeah.
This is why I find it so unbelievable that people don't think their actions have results. Because it's like even a moderate amount of observation is clearly obviously the case. So we feel bad when we do something we wish we hadn't done. And like, so if it's responding to a bully, for instance, even though it might actually be correct to reestablish that boundary and make sure they're conscious of the boundary, still you feel bad afterwards, you know. And so I think that's a healthy thing, and I think that's one of the issues that people have to contend with, which is it's healthy to experience that painful feeling. It's healthy to experience that sense of guilt. What's not healthy is to cling to it. Yeah, it's the clinging to it that is where we go wrong. Not, you know, there is a natural order. The Buddha talked about blame and no fear of blame and shame. So fear of blame being the censure of the tribe, and shame being that I can't live with myself for having done that. And he called them they were the twin guardians of the world, because that's what stops humanity from utterly degenerating, is the fact we've got these qualities of fear of blame and shame. So it's actually healthy to experience that, Rakesh. It just goes slightly wrong when we identify too strongly with it,
yeah,
and allow it to define us. That's where it becomes problematic, it seems.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Rakesh. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Andy.
Yeah, speaking about that shame and guilt, I was experiencing that the negative talk towards myself after having negative thoughts or actions, or even thoughts about somebody that I'm irritated with. It helped me a lot to become aware of that these last 2 weeks, to become more aware of my own thoughts towards myself being then negative, because that causes the shame and the guilt, and the shame and the guilt didn't help me to stay in contact with the other person. It only withdraw me.
Yes.
That wasn't positive. So that gave a negative response, and remembering those negative responses and results really helped me to change then in the actions. Because I became more aware of, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to. So stop thinking about this. Stop thinking negative about myself. Stop thinking negative about the other, but also about myself. I don't want to feel this. This is not nice to feel. And that really helped me quite often.
Yeah. Yes. We can be irritable. Other people can be irritable, and we pick up their irritability. It's especially in close quarters, families and things like that. It can, you know, work colleagues you spend a lot of time with. It can be so easy for things to get fractious, and then that's just normal. I mean, you know, it's just normal human behavior, really, isn't it? And so I think it is the clarity with which we, because you can't keep the precepts perfectly all the time, especially not speech. And I understand why most of this is centered around speech, because it is the most difficult one. It is difficult sometimes to tell the difference between what is my own personal opinion of this other person or their behavior and what is actually really going on. And so it is a very difficult, fraught area, and we're not supposed to get it perfect. But we do, in order to be happy, we do need to understand the nature of condition-dependent origination and be willing to be aware of the stains in the mind when they appear. You know, the memory, the unpleasant feeling, sense of guilt or shame or fear of blame, however manifests, and just recognize that these are indeed the results of that action, and making that connection, but they don't define me. So exactly what you're saying, Mandy, they don't define me. I can experience them with the understanding that they're transient. I can learn my lesson from them, and then I can move on. That's so important, that you're able to move on. I repeat again about the way we did it in the monastery, which would have a rules reading every month, at the end of which you rip up the piece of paper with all the broken rules on, having confessed them, and that act of utterance is getting them out so you can see them for what they truly are. You learn your lesson. If there's something that needs to be said, and so be it. It's painful, it's difficult, but then you get to rip up the piece of paper and move on. Yeah. So we're not being weighed down by it. We don't want to be weighed down by ethics. If you're practicing ethics in such a way that you start to feel ever more weighed down and feeling bad about yourself and the world, it's failing. Something's gone wrong somewhere. If you're living an ethical life in the right way, it leads to a sense of lightness and far less acrimony and far less resentment and far less irritation as a consequence of, because it's a middle way. It's not about being a perfect, pious, spiritual being. It's just about learning lessons as you go along. Thanks, Mandy. Anything else anyone would like to talk about, specifically about ethics and about anything that they've learned in the last couple of weeks? Peter, hello. If you could unmute.
Yeah, hello, Paul. Talking about truth, it's seeing truth as what any given person knows of himself, and that any other given person won't know until the first person tells him what it is, and reciprocally, if you'll excuse my tongue.
Do you mean an accurate description? You don't mean truth?
Well, this is it. What is truth?
Exactly. And I don't think this is the time to get into a deep philosophical discussion as to what truth is. But we're talking about, whatever it is, we're talking about somebody's opinion about what happened, and then relating their opinion using the limited resources of language, somebody else hearing what they have to say and interpreting what they have said using the limited resources of language. So all I'm saying is that if we recognize that we're dealing with descriptions but not truth, all descriptions are necessarily inaccurate, but it's just the degree of inaccuracy that we're talking about, then it becomes actually easier to deal with people than if we believe that somehow we've got hold of the truth. Because the truth is absolute, isn't it? It's the same for everyone.
Well, I don't think there is anything called absolute truth. All we know is what we've got running through ourselves at any given moment. And sometimes it's a good idea to tell someone else, and it's for them to take it in and maybe tell the first person what's going through them. I mean, the idea of truth, of an absolute, I'm having a lot of problems with it.
Wow, it sounds like you are. I, however, am not. And I don't believe this is the moment for a deep philosophical discussion as to the nature of absolute truth. However, in terms of relating to one another, I say again that if we recognize that all descriptions are inaccurate and that they are simply descriptions of things, that actually makes keeping the precepts to restrain from wrong speech actually easier. Yeah, because we're not dealing in truths, we're just dealing in, if you like, subjective descriptions of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
all it is. That's all it is. So here I think we can practice a little bit of renunciation. Annie, you wanted to make an observation.
Very briefly, Paul. It's just about truth. I was talking to someone earlier about this. I mean, if you and I were sitting in a room with a teapot and a couple of cups and saucers, if you said, can you pass the teapot, or would you say, I mean, calling something a teapot, that is a true statement, isn't it? But are you talking about the difference between conventional reality and ultimate reality? I mean, that is a teapot, isn't it? We would say that you're not telling, that is a true statement, isn't it?
Well, is it? It's a description of something, isn't it? But if say someone comes down from planet Zog,
okay,
and they've for some reason, some weird reason on planet Zog, they don't have tea.
Yeah. Okay.
To them, it wouldn't be a teapot.
It would just be alien, wouldn't it? It wouldn't be a lie, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion of what is truth. I'm not interested. I'm really hoping, Lucy, that that's not what you're asking.
No, it was just this whole thing about truth and perception, and
okay, I do understand, Annie. Yeah, thank you. I was
saying to someone earlier, there are certain things you say, well, we can agree that this is an oven or a casserole dish or something. We don't have to worry about that.
So the fact that we agree,
that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is an agreement.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a description of things.
Right.
Okay, Lucy.
Hi. I just wanted to turn the conversation slightly to a comment that was made last time on ethical conduct about abuse of narcotics and drugs and so on. And I think a suggestion was put forward, well, if it doesn't harm anybody else, what's wrong with it? And you said, well, it does harm other people. I just wanted to add to that a very concrete example where I was talking to an acquaintance of mine who has lost her brother. She's probably, which is a bit older than me, she's probably early 70s, something like that. Her brother's had a long history of alcohol and drug abuse. They don't have parents, so she's spent many years looking after him emotionally, financially, physically. He's now died really a lot earlier than he would have done otherwise, and she's left on her own. So it seemed to me a very concrete example about how abuse does harm not just yourself but other people around you. So I just wanted to add that back in.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, also there's the other side of the coin, not the other side of the coin, but there's another aspect to it from a Buddhist perspective, which is we all come in with lessons to learn, and sometimes we're placed in a position where the thing that we'd like to happen in our life isn't possible because of some other need. And although in this case it's unfortunate that it's somebody that did have issues with drink and drugs, that nonetheless the opportunity is there for that person who looked after them to learn some incredible valuable lessons in being there for others and so forth. So it's never, this is the problem again. It's the descriptions of things rather than trying to find some absolute truth to it. It's like there are all kinds of possibilities for learning things from those kinds of situations too, which does bring me on to thank you, Lucy, thank you for that. But it does also bring me on to the next parami, which is renunciation. So given everything that we talked about so far, what is renunciation? Who's willing to give it a definition, a working definition, because obviously we're dealing with descriptions of things, not truth, but a definition that we might agree on. Renunciation. What is it we're announcing when we renounce? Hello, Robert. Do you want to unmute there? Can I just remind everyone, unmute when you're going to have a word with me?
Good evening, Paul. I was saying that I've got quite a few books on Buddhism, but I couldn't find much about renunciation. And I resorted in the end to the Buddhist dictionary and found it under path, under magga. And it seems to coincide or align with right thought, right intention, I thought, which Nyantaloka describes as thoughts free from sensuous desire, free from ill will, and free from cruelty.
Okay, that's a nice start. It is a book answer, though.
Sure, I know.
But thank you. What do you think renunciation is?
I would say, in my own case, giving up some of my greed, lust, and hatred.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We've got a few hands up, so I'll go around and find out what other people think. Thanks for that, Robert. So we've got a classic definition in terms of it being, renouncing greedy, irritable, and cruel thoughts. Dave.
I was thinking it's letting go of things we're attached to.
Okay. How might that work in terms of the activities of the parami?
I don't really understand.
Oh, okay. So if you're generous, for instance, if somebody is really generous to somebody else, what,
Yeah.
in terms of renunciation, what is it that they're, in terms of attachment, what is it that they're renouncing?
Well, I was thinking that if you're letting go of something you're attached to, if you say let someone win an argument, or you let go of a possession you're really precious to you, or
Yes.
if you're generous to something which you don't really care about, it's not really letting go. So that's kind of that's a couple of thoughts on that.
Not a bad start though.
No.
But no, your point about letting somebody else win an argument is a perfect example of renunciation. So what's renunciation then, given that kind of? Hi Birgit, what are your thoughts?
I was just thinking, like, in a way, the first thing you would have to do is sort of notice a tendency in your mind of maybe wanting to do something or wanting not to do something, and then maybe deciding not to get carried away with that tendency, but to make a choice and maybe to choose not to follow that impulse sometimes.
Okay, is there a concrete example you have? All right, if there's not.
I didn't have a concrete example in my mind.
Okay. All right. Okay. See what other people think. Rebecca.
There's something about the freedom that you feel if you're letting go of something that you might like, but you're kind of, it's not sacrifice, because if it was sacrifice, then you might feel resentment, but you're perhaps giving up something, the attachment to something, because I'm thinking, giving up my time to do something for somebody else, but actually feeling good because of it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. So the resentment would only arise if you hadn't really renounced your own wishes. So it's only true renunciation, the giving of your time, your energy, sacrificing your own time and energy. Fine. I think that's a fine way of putting it. For the benefit of somebody else. What was it the Buddha said in the Dhammapada? He said, if for the sake of your own happiness, others are unhappy, thereafter you find no happiness. if for the sale of your own happiness, others find happiness, thereafter you find happiness. Yeah. So that's the renunciation, isn't it? So it's a trade. You're renouncing, you're giving up your little bit of happiness for the sake of being there for somebody else. As a consequence of that, you get back a greater happiness. Yeah. So I think that's the heart of what renunciation is. So it's, and again, we have to remember, it's not about giving away everything. It's not about giving up all your time. It's another thing we have to renounce is attachment to the way, for instance, we might be seen when, because we discussed it a couple of weeks ago, when it's an instant where you think, no, I've given too much, I can't give any more. Yeah. And if I was to give more now, then I will end up with resentment. So it's giving up the attachment to how somebody else will see you when you go, on this occasion, I just can't help you. There's that too. So that is part of renunciation. So we always tend to think it's renouncing stuff that we like. But what about renouncing the stuff that we don't like? Dave's example was where letting somebody else win the argument. That's when you're renouncing something that you don't like. Yeah. Peter, hello. You wanted to have a word?
Yeah. I always kind of try to articulate renunciation to myself as a willingness to make an intelligent sacrifice.
Yeah.
To let go of a smaller happiness to have a greater happiness, kind of thing. For example, one of my habitual traits is I have a lot of financial insecurity. I've always had financial insecurity, even if I've had money or if I hadn't had money.
Doesn't matter how much money you have, there's still insecurity.
Exactly. I have a natural state of financial insecurity. And I find if I, practicing, for example, the parami of generosity and renunciation, if I give some money to a kind of a beggar in the street or whatever, or buy somebody a cup of coffee, my initial instinct is, oh God, I'll have less money if I do that. And I haven't got much money at the moment. But then the response and the pleasant feeling that arises when I bought them a coffee, or I've given this beggar a sandwich or some money, it's a nicer feeling. It's a nicer feeling in that holding on to it's safer not to give anything away because that feels safe. And I don't want to break that. But if I do break it, I do feel better for it. And the universe seems to reflect that back to me. And eventually there's a kind of a payback to that, whether it's a mental one or an actual one. So that's my take on it.
Yes, and also there's this recognition that if it is that the universe does reflect my generosity in interesting and unsuspected ways, that the universe is looking after me and benevolent, then I don't need to be rich.
No.
I don't need to have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it just, again, this idea of the weights, taking weights off.
Yeah.
It's the development of the parami, then the weights of having to somehow secure a material existence in a fundamentally insecure state of affairs. It just, everything lightens and you realize, oh, I don't have to spend so much time dwelling on all of that.
Yeah.
I can leave the plates of life spinning on their sticks.
Yeah.
Because again, we come back to this thing of, it's like, we're just doing the parami. Yes, we're making life better for ourselves and better for other people, for our being generous and kind and thoughtful and so forth. But what's our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to transcend all of this. It's because you're never going to make it perfect. No amount of developing the parami is going to result in a perfect life. Yeah. The more money you've got, the more troubles you've got, quite frankly.
That's what it appears to me as I get older.
Yeah. And it becomes ever more insecure because it's now you can't even hide it under your bed. It's like It's not made of anything. It's all digital.
Yeah.
What's it made of?
Just a concept, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's just an idea, and somebody could just switch it all off one day, and then
Yeah.
that's a technical term.
Yeah.
So instead of placing our security in the material, we are gaining this deeper understanding of how life works, that it isn't dependent on that degree of financial security. That the monks of the Buddha's day had nothing. They literally just had their alms bowl, the robes they had so little, and they lived lives of such contentment. And yet they were faced with daily insecurity because they were reliant on the local village for their daily meal. So thank you. Nice observation, Peter. Mandy.
Yes, I want to ask, well, I wonder, is it then also renunciation is about letting go of one's view? So letting go of any, I mean, if you're talking about more practical way of letting go of some money or giving anything, you know, giving things away or whatever it is also letting go of a view that you need this to exist. So letting go of the ego, letting go of the views of the ego, could that be also behind it all?
Yes, behind it all. So the operation of the parami and gaining the knowledge through experience that you can renounce things and that you get this tremendous payback in an unexpected way, because it's very difficult to give up your views in the abstract. It's very difficult to give up a view just because someone suggests that it's a good idea. You have to know that it's in your own best interest. So if you've got the practical experience in the world of renouncing something and feeling good as a result of that renunciation, you start to associate the renunciation of things with feeling good. It then becomes easier when it comes, because the whole thing about the insight training is it's showing you that there is no world for you to cling on to. So there is a renunciation of the deepest possible views of the nature of existence. And so that's why the parami is so powerful, because it helps to kick off that process in practical, pragmatic ways where you can reap the benefit of renunciation, and you're gaining this faith that it's okay to let go. It's okay to abandon attachment to things. It's okay to let go of the world. It's okay to let go of the ego, the idea of self. It's perfectly okay. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Yeah. So it's tending in that direction.
So by a practical way, you can come to the understanding that you can, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Natalie.
Yes, hi, Paul. Sorry. Yeah, I was thinking about renunciation in terms of going on retreat, because I mean, I've always quite really enjoyed retreats actually, and look forward to them. And but recently, getting older and finding I've had a lot of self-concern around not being able to do things or having slight health issues, and I can see that this focus on renunciation would be about facing the self-concern and just saying, I'm going, I'll do it. I would do it anyway, regardless of what goes on, and because you'd be renouncing self-concern, and that would be such a valuable thing and would help hugely with my whole attitude towards all other things. Because I think if I renounce the self-concern towards health issues and how will I manage on the retreat, and that, I think it will have an impact on other areas of my life as well, where self-concern is obviously fairly evident.
Well, yes. I mean, ultimately, self-concern is what's being renounced, isn't it?
Yes.
In all these things.
Yes.
And again, you know, renouncing comfort, renouncing security, having to face, you know, the physical challenges of being on a retreat when you're a bit older, and it's not quite, it's not quite as easy. And I hope that we're able to be flexible, but we don't want to be so flexible that everyone is each getting their own little way of doing things. We couldn't function. And so there is a necessity for people when they come on retreat to renounce their ways of doing things. I mean, that's huge. I mean, that takes in so much of everything that we're talking about with regard to renunciation. The willingness to do things the way the centre does things, rather than insisting that they be done in the way that we like. I mean, literally, I had one, you know, we have this practical issue, like, how do we get people hot water? We put it in flasks and you just get a hot drink from the flask. One person came on retreat and literally just hated that so much that it wasn't freshly boiled water, that they never came back on retreat.
That is ridiculous. Yes. God.
And they knew, and they, with all the greatest respect, they knew it was ridiculous. So maybe there was something deeper. That was just the tip of the iceberg of their complaints, I think. But yeah, it is that willingness to renounce comfort, to renounce our way of doing things, to allow, you know, because ultimately self-concern is the issue. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Birgit.
I was just thinking, like, in a way, every time we sit down for meditation, that's a degree of renunciation, isn't it? It's renunciation of not doing something else instead.
Absolutely, it is. And, you know, what I always say is, like, when you're meditating, and it's not about how well you're meditating, but just the fact that you're there meditating, doing your best to meditate, you are fulfilling all 8 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah. So absolutely. You could just be watching telly or doing the ironing or going for a walk or whatever, but you've chosen to be here this evening. You had to renounce other things that you could be doing because you believe, or you have faith that it's worthwhile and it yields something greater than your investment or your renunciation. So yeah, very good point, Birgit. Very good point. Giuseppe, good evening.
Hi, Paul. Good evening. I think I just thought of one thing, but it could come under a discipline thing as well. But I just find myself endlessly scrolling on my phone on stuff, and then, I mean, it's only relatively recently really seeing the connection between that and sitting down with a head that, you know, it's just filled with junk and thoughts about things and very excited sort of mind. So I've really consciously thought recently about very consciously limiting what I look at, because obviously algorithms are programmed to keep you going back. Oh, that's, and then I mean, I had to find out something to do with work, and then all of a sudden everything to do with that subject is presented in front of you. Or if you accidentally even click on something, everything to do. So it's this AI thing is really run like a mind anyway. But the point is just really seeing how renunciation of just one small activity has made a positive impact on being able to sit. You know?
I think that is a very, very good observation. None of the parami are truly separate from the rest. So yeah, it does, you know, it is about ethical conduct, isn't it? But it is also about renouncing. And because I was going to come on to, well, how do we do it? How do we do it for the next couple of weeks? What do we regard as renunciation? Because you don't want to go to the extreme of asceticism where you never look at the internet. You know, we don't want to become like, you know, become like that, extreme like that. So it is about navigating our way through life, for me, there's one thing I'm trying to eat less. So I'm trying to go, doing this intermittent fasting thing, having a window of eating, and then outside of that, I don't. For me personally, it feels like this time of life, that's the right thing to do, and I feel better for it. So it's not an absolute either. It's like, sometimes I wake up and I go, nope, porridge. that's what I'm doing. But generally speaking, over time, I find that that is a helpful level of renunciation. I don't think it's extreme, and I find that it does help me with meditation, and it does help with my overall sense of well-being. And so it's just navigating our way in the next couple of weeks and discovering the opportunities where, maybe in order to be of service to others, we do have to let go of some cherished time that we had intended for ourselves, and that we go, all right, then you need to do that. Okay, we'll do that. It's just, if it's seeing that you're watching too much TV, or you're scrolling a lot, and it's a bit, you're being in stupid mode, and it's just recognizing that and going, all right, that'll do, enough, and just renouncing it for the time being. And that's the thing with renunciation. It's never saying never, ever, under any circumstances. It's just saying, on this occasion, here is an opportunity where I can practice just giving that up, or letting go of my self-concern in that regard. Does anyone else, any other ideas of how we can practice renunciation? Mandy, you've got a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Could it be a practice also to stop moaning to my children?
Oh, I think that'd be really good. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Well, there's a difference between moaning, isn't there? And there are things that need doing. It's like, and when we say moaning, it's like, to them it's moaning, but there's got to be some kernel of accuracy in what you're saying.
Yeah,
like,
but that's subjective.
Subjective. It is subjective. But so I think it is about maybe just playing with the, on certain occasions, just playing with renouncing acting upon that impulse. Maybe the thing Ellen was talking about, leaving it a little bit longer, seeing if you still feel like that a little bit later. That might be a way. Yeah? Okay. Peter.
Yeah, recently, for whatever reason, when I'm meditating, I've become very aware of my narrations in my head about the story of Peter, either in the past or in the future. And now and again, I've had the awareness to realize it's a story. And I mutter to myself as a mantra, Jackanory. And when I do that, I can pull myself out the dream for a short period of time, and I'm just kind of body aware or environment aware, and I'm aware that's quite a happy place, because I'm not thinking about the past or the future. It doesn't last for huge amounts of time, but it reminds me that every time I think there is a dualistic world, that I appear to suffer. So I endeavor to catch myself in my story and sort of haul myself out of it into just being kind of body mindful. It's like mindful of the body or environment.
Aware of the senses. There are 5 physical senses, but there's also mind.
Yeah.
And so essentially we're being present, we're being in the moment. And so that can help tremendously in developing the parami, because if we recognize that we are indeed running a story, whatever the story happens to be for whomever it is, whether it's a story about ourselves or it's a story about somebody else, that it is indeed a story and is not the truth, then that can radically free us to be able to be of service and to be there for other people. Because remember, that's what the parami are. It is about so the renunciation aspect is renouncing our own wishes and desires for the benefit of others. and being there for them. And of course, what we learn in our meditation helps us tremendously in developing the parami. And what we learn in terms of developing the parami helps us tremendously in terms of our meditation. So there's no strict divide between what we do in the external world and what we do meditatively. So renunciation. Yeah, there we go. So we've all renounced our Monday evening to be together, which was lovely. And so we'll get together again in a couple of weeks, and we'll see how we got on with the renunciation parami.